Alright everyone, let's go ahead and get started. So today we are going to be working on part 1 of our Bootstrap tutorial. Bootstrap is a really cool technology that came from Twitter. They actually were the ones who developed this and made it. What Bootstrap does is it reads attributes of our elements. So in our HTML code we have different items, right, like an h1 tag or a div tag, and then we have things inside of those like IDs and classes, and based on those there's specific words we put in as the names for those classes, and it will read those and automatically make CSS for us. It will automatically style a lot of it for us. It makes it really powerful and really neat. So I'm already in my self-paced coding temple folder. I've already made a photography bootstrap folder inside of that, so I'm going to cd into it, and then I'm going to open it up in VS Code. Alrighty, so here we go. And we're going to make an index.html piece, and that should be about it. Because we're going to use pretty much just HTML. You can add CSS to style specific things if you'd like to, but just be careful if you do decide to do that, that you need to just be aware whether or not the HTML and CSS are going to be clashing, whether Bootstrap and the CSS are going to be clashing, because Bootstrap will say, hey, I want you to style it this way, and then if you've said other things, then that CSS might be trying to, if you wrote a CSS file that's going to say other things about it, just be careful that they're not conflicting with each other, because then you can end up with some really strange things happening where you change your CSS and nothing changes on the screen, that kind of a deal. You just want to be aware of that and be careful of that. So we're going to start out with, so normally when we do this we start out with just an exclamation mark for the M abbreviation, right? And when you press tab or enter it will fill out a template. We actually want to do the BCDN5. It's the Bootstrap 5 starter template, right? So I'm just going to click on it, and it will fill all this out, and you'll notice right away that different than our previous HTML files, we've got a whole bunch more stuff in here. We've got more style sheets coming from some websites. We've got these scripts. Don't worry too much about what exactly that stuff is. All that is like that's actually connecting Bootstrap to our document. Okay, and we are going to comment that out. Because we aren't super concerned right now with the CSS file. But if you did want to have that, you would just put style.css right here, and it would be in the same folder and they would be connected. But we're not super concerned about that. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pause real quick and pull up the website we're going to be making so you guys can kind of see the goal of where we're heading. So let me grab that real quick. All right, so this is what we're making. So these are my photos from Alaska. It's kind of a generic photography website, and then we've got a gallery down here that just kind of displays some pictures, which is kind of neat. So you guys should have all of these folders available to you in a Google Drive or Google Classroom. We'll get that to you. We'll have that linked somewhere with this video. So we'll have all that stuff. We've got this nice little scrolling thing here. So there's that. But we're just displaying content. Bootstrap is very easy to make, a very simple, beautiful layout. And one of the really nice things about Bootstrap is it's very responsive. So you notice that as soon as I start to shrink this, the text and the images start stacking vertically instead, versus when I'm out here, now they're horizontal. And especially our grid down here, right, as it shrinks, they rearrange, and that is a pretty nifty feature. So I'm going to go back to VS Code, and here we are. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to be doing is I want to just point out that an h1 tag looks a little bit different here, right? So and that's because Bootstrap styles things automatically. Bootstrap comes with its own font package, and again, that makes it nice, right? But we just need to, I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that there's things that it does automatically. and point that out. So you should have autosave on here. That should be, I think, under your preferences. Here, let's do it this way. Autosave. There you go. So you can turn it's under File, Autosave. You can turn that on. Super nifty, right? And then again, I think we talked about this before, that under the extensions, I have the live server extension going. You should be able to search for that in extensions. It will look like this. And so I can close out of that and go back to this. You can either click on it here and go open with live server, or you can just click right on your code and go to open with live server. Either way, will pull up our website. So you notice that this is not our regular font. This is a different font because, again, that comes with Bootstrap. If we inspect it, we can see on, if I can pull it up here. So our font size got changed with the H1, but our actual font here is going to be Roboto. That comes with Bootstrap, as well as some other stuff too. But we're going to go back. Obviously, that's not our entire application, and I don't actually want that there. So I'm going to get rid of it. So we're going to begin with a nav. Now, as we're doing Bootstrap, there'll be another video between this and the end of and the finish of this particular project that you guys will watch on the different screen sizes and the grid layout, because Bootstrap's got its own grid thing that's a little bit different than CSS grid. In CSS grid, you would write your CSS element, right, your container, your wrapper thing, and then you would have display grid. And here it's a little bit differently. There's kind of an always a grid going on with Bootstrap, which is part of what helps make it look really clean and neat. It's very desirable. But obviously, like anything else, we've got to learn how to use that well. So Bootstrap uses these different class things. So I could write this to like this. And then in here I could write class equals something here, right? And so this would be both class something and class here. If I wanted it to just be one class, I'd have a dash in between, and then it would be class something here. If you have a space, then this is actually two classes that it belongs to. And classes are things, again, that we're going to use over and over and over again across our code. IDs tend to be something we want for just one item. So this could be ID equals nav, right? Or navbar or whatever. But we're not going to use a lot of IDs here today. What we're going to use is mostly classes. And what Bootstrap does is there's certain words we can put in the class, and Bootstrap will look for it, find it, and then make the CSS for us. We don't even see the CSS until it's on the final product. Obviously, something and here are not classes that are going to mean a whole lot to Bootstrap, and I prefer to write this stuff a little differently. So I'm going to write nav dot. And you'll remember when we did our CSS, that like dot class dot whatever, that meant that it was a class from our HTML, and we were linking the two, and that's going to be how we connect the dots. Ha 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 dots. Versus a hashtag, # number, sharp, whatever you want to call it, right? That would be for an ID. But we're going to be using dots because we want to do classes here. So we're going to have nav.navbar, and then navbar, expand large, and then background dark, and navbar dark, and then py-3, we'll talk about that in a second, and then fixed top. Okay, I'm going to press tab, I'm going to press enter, and you notice that it automatically put in class equals here, and then put all of these in with different spaces in between. And so again, each one of these items here, right, so navbar, expand, large, what that means is that that's one class that Bootstrap knows what to do with, right? It's going to say, oh, it's a navbar, and I want it to be expanded when the screen size is large, right? That's how that works. It says, oh, all the time I want this to be background dark, and I want the navbar to be dark. This should be a navbar. And I'm going to do things that automatically style a navbar shaped thing. You'll notice once we render this, once we look on the next page, once we put some content in it, that it automatically makes it into a long row, right? Because HTML by default stacks vertically, but we put it in as class navbar, and so now Bootstrap is going to say, hey, it's a navbar, those go at the top of the page horizontally. So I'm going to make this into a row automatically for us, which is really neat. Bootstrap's also super powerful because it helps clarify and clean up responsive web design, right? So that as you're growing and shrinking your browser, that stuff, it rearranges as we go, as you saw earlier, so that for smaller devices and different device sizes, you won't end up having problems with how it displays. So that is our first nav class. I think we should be able to look at this over here. Yeah. So here's our web page so far. You notice there's this dark item here at the top. That is our navbar right now. It doesn't have any text in it, but that's going to be our navbar so far, which is pretty neat. So back to our code. Let's add some more stuff. So we're going to do div.container, and if we go to Bootstrap's documentation, we can read a little bit about containers, right? So this is from getbootstrap.com. We're on Bootstrap version 5. You can do some other versions, but we're using 5 for our tutorial today. And so containers are a fundamental building block of Bootstrap that contain, pad, and align your content within a given device or viewport. Okay, so we've talked about how divs are like boxes, right? In HTML. This is basically them saying the same thing. And so if you want to read more of the details, you can. The different sizes of containers that you can make. And then, yeah, the regular container is responsive, which again means that it shrinks and grows based on the screen size. Pretty neat. And then the SAS stuff you'll see, that is just relating to how it makes the CSS in the background. So if you really want to kind of customize the snot out of Bootstrap, you can, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to, unless you're doing something really specific and really powerful and you want it exactly your way. But for everything that we're doing in this course, there's no reason that you would have to learn that stuff, as you will see. So back to our website, here we are, and let's go back to our code. So that's what a container is, and we're going to put some other stuff in here. So we're going to do an A tag, and we're going to have navbar brand, okay? And we're going to put, for the reference, for the location, we're just going to put another pound sign, hashtag sharp, whatever you want to call it. Okay, we're just going to put that in there because we don't actually want this to go anywhere for right now, right? We just want this to display well. So I'm going to have my landscapes. We should probably put that in as the title as well. Or you could have Alaskan landscapes, whatever else you want to call it. Not a huge deal to me. But, so we've got our reference there, and then we're going to have a button. We're going to add some stuff in here. So first we're going to have a class called navbar toggler. And what this is doing is we're setting up, and actually I'm going to put this on a separate line here because we're going to have more stuff in there. The navbar toggler is going to allow us to, you'll see it in a little bit, that when we shrink our web page, we're instead of having all of our different like items on the navbar, all the about and the gallery, the locations, all the other stuff that we're going to have up there, if it gets to a small enough window, that stuff's going to disappear and just go to a button, and then you click on that button and then a menu shows up, which would be really nifty. So that's what we are working on here. The type is going to be a button. Data-bs-toggle is collapse. And then last data-bs-target equals nav menu. And so what we're doing here is we're connecting some dots. We haven't written all of this yet, so to a certain extent, you're going to just have to believe me that this is how this works. But in a second, we're going to actually tie this nav menu, and that's going to be the thing that ends up collapsing. So we said I need that to collapse when we toggle it, and that's other item is what is going to be displaying or not displaying. So that was strange. That's not what I wanted at all. There we go. All right. we're going to add something here called a span. And spans are used for usually what's called inline containers. And so with our divs, that's a container that you want not to be like inline. Let me just show you what I mean by inline. So if you have a paragraph and you have one sentence in the middle of it and you want to change a whole bunch of things about that one sentence in the middle, then you could use a span and put other stuff in there, and it would still display in the same size and the same item as your larger container. That's what I mean by inline, right? Is that it's not going to do anything outside of out of bounds per se, but it will do it inline rather than outside of that. So we're going to have, for this button, we're going to give it just a little bit more information here. So let's have navbar toggler icon. Okay, and so what this is doing here, we've got this span, we've got this toggler icon, and that's actually kind of an interesting way. We used in our previous lesson, our HTML CSS stuff, we saw that we could use font awesome. What we're doing here is we're just using a class to basically do the same thing, where we're going to have that little hamburger menu is what we call it, and that will show up. I'll point it out in a second. So just bear with me for right now, and we'll get through this, and then I'll point out all the different parts of what this is doing on our code in a moment. So next we're going to have another div. So our button ended. We've got our A tag. We've got our button, and now we've got a div, and we're going to have collapse. It helps if you spell it right. By the way, spelling errors will break your code if you're using Bootstrap. And then navbar collapse, and we're going to have the ID nav menu. Okay, and so when I tab this out, see how this made a new ID, and what's happening here is I'm connecting this target dot, right? So data BS target goes to nav menu, right? And that's tying into this. So the stuff inside of this div is going to be collapsible. And if it's not collapsed, then the toggler icon will display. Or if it is collapsed, then the toggler icon will display. All right. So next we're going to have a UL. That's an unordered list, as we saw previously. And we're going to have navbar dash nav, and then ms auto. And our list items. And again, this is just saying that this is part of our navbar. And ms auto. Let's look this up here. That wasn't what I wanted. There we go. So this is just going to be a margin. So M is for margin, and then S is for at the start. So it's going to be pushing things left and right to make sure that there's space between things, which will be nice. And you can see back on our website, there's our brand name that is now displaying. So back over to here, navbar ms auto, and we're going to put some list items in here. The first one is going to be a nav item class, and inside of it, we're going to put an a tag, and that's going to be class nav link. All right. And we're going to put this to about. We don't actually end up having an about section on our page, but that's okay. We could have this as a separate website if we wanted to. Totally up to you. And we're going to put the text about in there. That should be displaying now over here, so you can see that. And when I click on it, you notice that the URL changes to the ID about, but we don't have an about set yet, and that's okay. So let's finish out this this nav bar here. We've got another nav item with an a tag for nav link. I'm going to put this one to gallery. And you'll notice again that when we go back over here, they automatically space themselves. They're not right on top of one another, which is pleasant to not have to write out all of those little margins and spacing and rearranging and that other stuff. So it's just way quicker to do it this way. And then last, we're going to have another nav link, and this one will be to locations. There we go. So that should be a nav bar. Now, again, I was talking about how this shrunk. Look at that. As soon as we get past a certain size, which if we look back at our code, should be anything smaller than a large screen, right? So right now we're somewhere near a medium. If I go slightly bigger, there it is. It pops up, spreads out automatically. But then if we shrink, and then we get back to this, and we have this hamburger menu that drops down with the same content. Super nifty, super cool. And a lot of, again, the styling and stuff is done automatically for us. But if you're on a small screen, then these will drop down. And if you're on a larger screen, then they pop out and you don't have to worry about it. Super neat. So that's our first video. We will move on to a second video. But, I don't know why I said that. Anyways, what I want you guys to do is go ahead, and there's a video that's coming up on the grid that Bootstrap uses to arrange things. If, for example, you might notice that this stuff is not at the very edge of my screen, and some of that has to do with how the grid works and what we'll be doing with that next. So I need to come up with better like opening and closing catchphrases. Stay classy, Coding Temple. All right. Anyways, yeah. So go ahead and watch that video, and then we will move on to our next section of our code. It's going to be great. See you there.